In today's video, I'm going to cover whether you should be reselling clothes or hard goods. So stick around. Welcome back to all my returning subscribers, and for those of you this is your first time here, welcome to my channel. What I teach here is how to get started reselling or how to turn it into a full-time income. If you want to do it as part-time, that's okay. If you're doing it part-time and you're looking to kick it to that next level, shoot on over to thekingofthrift.com, and there's all sorts of resources and things there to help you get started and get you on your way. Now with that out of the way, guys, let's get right into the topic today. Should you be reselling shoes or clothing? Should you be reselling clothing or hard goods? It's a tough question. I remember when I started out in this game back in 2003, that was actually when I went full time. I actually started around 2001. I remember back then, the problem that I would have when I went out and shopped was knowing what to buy and what to resell, or what to buy in order to resell. What I would find is nearly every thrift shop is mostly clothing. As far as I was concerned, biggest opportunity was in clothing, or so I thought. Now what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna go over some pros and cons of each. And hopefully by the end of this thing, you'll have a much clearer picture and you'll have a much better idea as far as what's gonna work for you. So what I ended up doing was I would buy a mix of both. I would buy mostly hard goods. When I first started out, I bought and sold hard goods almost exclusively. And that was because clothing was just such a specialized industry. I knew nothing about it. I knew that I wore it and everyone wore it. I was no sort of expert in men's clothing. I didn't know anything about vintage clothing. So needless to say, I basically stayed away from clothing and went into hard goods. The problem with hard goods that I found right away was the fact that they take up so much space. Hard goods are going to fill up a warehouse, a garage, a spare bedroom in your home relatively quickly, depending on how fast and how furious you're working this thing. Hard goods are going to be much more difficult to store. I wouldn't say more difficult, I would just say they're gonna take a lot more space. They could actually end up being a little easier to store in the fact that you can stack them, but in that instance, many times you're gonna have to put them in a box and then stack them. Some things lend themselves to being stacked upon, but most things don't. Now, one of my favorite things about clothing is the fact that you can store a large amount in a relatively small space. Another good thing about clothing is they are very lightweight, so you don't have weight to deal with. You don't have any sort of weight to deal with until you get a lot of clothes together. Then they can be tremendously heavy. But an article of clothing, as we all know, has not much weight to it. So very lightweight, one of the best things about clothing. Another great thing about clothing is that it's unbreakable, basically unbreakable. So when you ship something, with the exception of someone slicing it open when they go to open the box, you're probably not gonna have to worry about your clothing getting there safe and sound. Another great thing about clothing is plentiful in the marketplace. There are tons and literally tons and thousands, hundred thousands of tons in every thrift shop everywhere across America. With that in mind, you're gonna have no shortage of supply, but kind of niche down, ratchet it down and sort of narrow in. Don't just go into clothing in general, because if you do that, it's too broad and you're not big enough. You're not gonna be able to compete with the much larger stores on eBay and the internet in general. Trying to compete on that level to just sell, say, men's clothing or women's clothing in general is gonna be difficult. Not to say that it's impossible, it'd just be much more difficult to build, but if that's something you're into, hey, more power to you, and it can be done. I've seen it done. Matter of fact, I did it myself. I started in pretty generalized men's clothing, and then I sort of ratcheted down, and now I'm an expert in vintage clothing. But I do sell men's clothes all across the board. We sell vintage, we sell brand new, we do wholesale, we do, all sorts. Long story short, there's plenty of clothing out there. Okay guys, now we're gonna cover some of the cons of clothing. One of the worst things as far as I'm concerned with clothing and going into clothing exclusively as a reseller is the competition levels. The competition levels are so high. There's so many people out there. There's so many new resellers now that it's gonna be difficult to break into clothing, period. Another thing with clothing is market saturation. There's so many sellers out there. There's so many clothing that there's so much clothing in the marketplace that whenever someone goes in and looks for, a blue t-shirt, size medium, they find, 600,000 of them, instead of 35 or 55, they find 600 or 700 or 900 or 10,000. That's the saturation problem that we're having. So that does add to the difficulty as far as breaking into this game. The biggest problem related to this topic is the fact that because the market is saturated, it's going to be difficult for you to get your clothing in front of new customers. People who are already existing sellers are going to take priority as far as the algorithm is concerned. eBay's algorithm is going to rate them higher than they do you because you're a new seller, because you have less items, you've sold less, you haven't been in business as long. Another problem you're gonna have with clothing, guys, get ready, is returns. You're gonna get tons of returns. It's just a fact. It's the nature of the game. When you sell hard goods, you're not gonna get that many returns. And the reason why is because hard goods fit. They fit everybody. You know, a 32-inch television fits everyone. The guy knows what he's getting. He doesn't bring it home and put it up on the wall and say, this doesn't fit right, I gotta send it back. No, he turns it on. It's exactly what he was looking for. It's 32 inches. It fits right over in the corner. Perfect. It's not gonna send it back unless something's wrong with it. That's the problem with clothing, guys, is they don't fit right. They don't fit right. So if you go into clothing, don't get upset when you get returns. Just honor your return system and move on. Okay, and the last problem you're gonna have with clothing, as far as I am concerned, is the fact of storing it. Like I said, you can store a lot more clothing in a smaller space, but it is more difficult to store clothing because clothing is fragile. You know, you can't just throw a piece of clothing in a bag, and tie it up and toss it in the corner. When you go back to pick it up in 6 months or however long, it's going to be crinkled and wrinkled. It's not going to be worth anything. With that in mind, you've got to store clothing accordingly, the same way you store your own clothing. You've got to hang things up that need to be hung. You fold things up that you can fold. Which brings me to a point, guys. You're going to need a tremendous rack system, hanging system to hang all these clothings. If you go into clothing, you want to have room for 3, 4, 5, 10,000 pieces of clothing. It does take up a lot of space, but like I said, not as much space as 10,000 hard goods, but the difficulty level could be slightly more or less difficult as far as storing it. They got to be temperature controlled. You can't have mold and mildew growing on your leathers and moths eating your wool, sweaters and things like that. The moisture levels got to be low, and everything's got to be hung up and folded and stacked and everything just, in a very particular way. So keep that in mind with clothing. Okay, on to hard goods. Now, hard goods is a total another animal. Having done both, I actually love both, and now I do both. Anytime I can find them, I'm gonna grab them. The best thing about hard goods, they're easy to find. Hard goods are easy to find. You can find them anywhere. You can find them on Craigslist. You can find them on OfferUp. You can find hard goods to flip on eBay. I've bought things on eBay and sold them on eBay. You can find them at garage sales. You can find them at thrift shops, guys. You're gonna find hard goods virtually everywhere. Go dumpster dive. People out there dumpster diving, getting free hard goods. So hard goods are very plentiful. They're everywhere. Another great thing about hard goods is they're quick to move, guys. Hard goods move quickly. And like I said earlier, the reason why is because when someone buys something, a hard good, they know exactly what they're getting. And unless it's broken or something's really, really wrong with it, they're not sending it back. When you sell it, it stays sold and it's easy to move. It's going to move much more quickly than, say, a very particular styled shirt and a particular design from a particular era, from a particular brand. All these things in other words, all these things have to line up for one person to want any particular piece of fashion wear or clothing. Now, when you sell a PlayStation 5, man, the guy who doesn't know how to dress wants one. The guy who can dress, to impress wants one. The sharp dresser wants one, and the guy who's got no clothes wants one. It doesn't matter. Okay, another great thing about hard goods is it requires much less expertise. Clothing are extremely research intensive work. I mean, you've got to really know your stuff if you're going to sell clothing. Selling hard goods is very simple. You just look up a hard good, see what it's worth, and you flip it. Nothing to it. So with that in mind, hard goods are much more easy as far as expert levels are concerned. You don't need to be that much of an expert to sell hard goods. Now we're going to cover the cons, guys. The cons of hard goods take up a lot of space. So you're going to need a warehouse. You're going to need a huge amount of space if you're going to do this on any sort of level to make any sort of an income. Another thing that's with hard goods is they are much more difficult to ship than clothing. You're going to need significantly more boxes, packaging, bags, peanuts, and all sorts of things, guys. You're going to need bigger boxes and smaller boxes. You're going to have to build custom boxes, Franken boxes. It's going to take more time to ship these items, and it's going to be harder to ship them because they're fragile. And you got to make sure that they get there in one piece, which brings me to the next con of hard goods. They're breakable, guys. They can easily break in shipment. So clothing do not, hard goods can break. Another con, guys, of hard goods is the fact that you've got to test every hard good that you get before you ship it out. It means you got to test to make sure everything works. If one function doesn't work, you got to tell them that function don't work. So in other words, if you buy an 8-track or a CD player or a DVD or whatever, you've got to check every function on that thing. You got to plug it in, you got to put a tape in, you got to see if it works. It's just like you got to hook it up, and you need wires, and sometimes you're missing wires. It can be a headache. It can be a headache, but there's pros and cons, guys. That's what we're doing. So hard goods are going to require more testing, and on top of that, that can break on the way in, in shipment. Basically, I want you to take this information, mull it around, digest it, and see which works for you. Because I'm not going to tell you should do clothing. I'm not going to tell you should do hard goods. I think you should do whatever works for you. Personally, when I go out and shop, now I will pick up hard goods. I pick up clothing. I pick up more clothing than hard goods. But I do not have any sort of affinity either way. Whatever makes money for me, that's what I'm into. Matter of fact, guys, on that note, you guys know I'm a clothing expert. That's what I sell is men's clothing. But I picked this up. This is a hard good. This is a perfect example of if I find a really nice hard good, I will grab it. Now, you can see this? You see that? That is sealed in the box, guys. And that is what you call that's a grail right there. That's what you call that. And now you can see I picked it up here for $5.47 right there. So, and it's probably good for about $500, maybe $600. But that's just a perfect example of how, you don't limit yourself. If you decide you're going into hard goods, don't limit yourself. When you find a really good, clothing piece, or say you go out and you're shopping and you're looking for hard goods all day, and you just spent the day and you've only found a little bit of this or a little bit of that, shoot on over the clothes and see what you can find, All you need, it only takes one or two items, one or two killers, to make your day. Hopefully something I said here, guys, helped you out, helped you on your way in your reselling journey. If it did, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. And if you have not subscribed to this channel already and you're looking to get started reselling, or you're already reselling and you're looking to take it to that next level, then subscribe right now and make sure you shoot on over to thekingofthrift.com, where I've got all sorts of resources to help you guys on your way to turning your reselling into a full-time income. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This has been Phil, also known as the King of Thrift. Until my next video, you guys get on out there and make that money on eBay.